Here are 3 chilling real ghost stories that have been shared over the years, leaving many questioning the line between reality and the supernatural. 1. The Ghost of the Myrtles Plantation. Located in Louisiana, the Myrtles Plantation is considered one of the most haunted homes in America. Built in 1796, it is said to be haunted by several spirits, including Chloe, a former slave. Legend has it that Chloe poisoned the family she worked for, killing 2 children and their mother. Afterward, Chloe was hanged by fellow slaves, and her ghost is believed to roam the plantation, wearing a green turban. Guests report seeing her spirit in mirrors, hearing footsteps when no one is around, and encountering cold spots in the house. The plantation's ghostly activity has been so frequent that it has become a hotspot for paranormal enthusiasts. 2. The Haunting of the Villisca Axe Murder House. In 1912, in Villisca, Iowa, a gruesome crime occurred when 8 people, including 6 children, were brutally murdered with an axe in their home. The killer was never caught, and the house has remained a site of unexplained phenomena. Visitors have reported hearing children's laughter, disembodied footsteps, and doors opening and closing on their own. Some paranormal investigators claim to have recorded EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, of voices pleading for help. The house remains a grim reminder of the past and a destination for thrill seekers looking for a brush with the unknown. 3. The Enfield Poltergeist. In the late 1970s, the Hodgson family in Enfield, England, experienced a terrifying series of paranormal events. Furniture moved on its own, knocking sounds echoed through the house, and one of the daughters, Janet, reportedly became the focus of the poltergeist's activity. Witnesses, including journalists and paranormal investigators, claimed to have seen Janet levitating and speaking in guttural voices. The case became so famous that it inspired books, documentaries, and even the movie The Conjuring 2. While skeptics argue that it was an elaborate hoax. Here's a chilling story often shared in the quiet, dark corners of hospitals during night shifts. I used to work the night shift at an old hospital that was rumored to be haunted. Most of us brushed it off. It's easy to blame creaks and shadows on fatigue when you're pulling 12-hour shifts. But there was one incident none of us could forget. It happened in Room 9, a small isolation room tucked into a dim corner of the pediatric ward. It wasn't used often, mostly for overflow during flu season. One night, we admitted a little boy named Michael. He was around 7, brought in for pneumonia. Sweet kid, pale, frail, but polite. His mom stayed by his side while we monitored him. Around midnight, Michael's oxygen levels started to dip. I was the nurse on duty, so I rushed in to adjust his mask. He was wide awake, staring at the empty chair in the corner of the room. "Who are you talking to, Michael?" I asked. "The man," he whispered, his little voice hoarse. "What man?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "The man with no face. He wants to play." I froze. Every hair on my neck stood up. I looked around, but the room was empty, just me, Michael, and his mother dozing in the recliner. I chalked it up to fever and imagination, adjusted his oxygen, and went back to the nurse's station. An hour later, Michael's call bell went off. I hurried back. This time, his mother was awake, standing beside his bed with tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked her. "Michael says there's someone in the room," she said, voice trembling. I looked at Michael, and he was pointing at the corner, the same chair. "He's closer now," he said. That was it. I turned on all the lights and checked every inch of the room. Nothing. I calmed the mom down, and we settled Michael again. Just before dawn, I checked on him one last time before my shift ended. His oxygen levels were stable, and he was finally asleep. I whispered a good night and turned to leave. That's when I saw it. The chair. It had moved. It was now directly beside Michael's bed. I felt paralyzed. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Slowly, I turned toward the window reflection. In the glass, I saw what I can only describe as a shadow looming over Michael. It had no face. Michael's oxygen alarm suddenly blared, and I rushed to him. But it was too late. His tiny body lay still, cold to the touch, as if something had stolen the last bit of his breath. Later that morning, when I told the story, an older nurse paled and whispered, "Room 9. That's the same room where the man died 30 years ago, suicide by suffocation." I'll never forget Michael's last words. He's closer now. To this day, that chair is kept in storage, and we avoid room 9 if we can.
It began without warning on an ordinary autumn night. In the quiet town of Clearwater, the sky split open. A roaring sound like thousands of jet engines filled the air, shaking houses and rattling windows. People ran outside, staring up in shock as countless dark shapes descended from the clouds, blocking out the stars. At first, they looked like meteorites, jagged, black pods crashing into fields, forests, and streets with an ear-splitting impact. But when the dust settled, the pods began to open. They unfolded like grotesque flowers, revealing something that wasn't human. The aliens emerged slowly, towering and skeletal, with limbs too long and joints that moved unnaturally. Their skin was smooth and oily, reflecting light, and their faces, no eyes, no mouths, just a blank, pulsing surface. And yet, somehow, they saw you. They knew where you were. Panic spread through Clearwater as the first screams filled the air. The aliens moved silently and swiftly, snatching anyone who stood in their path. They didn't kill outright, no blood, no bodies. Instead, the people they touched simply stopped moving. Stiff. Unblinking. Frozen where they stood. Those left behind whispered in horror as they watched loved ones vanish into the pods, carried like trophies. As the hours passed, Clearwater became a ghost town. Streetlights flickered and went dark. The hum of electricity died, and an unnatural silence swallowed everything. Emma, a teenager who had barricaded herself in her basement, clutched her father's hunting rifle, though she knew it wouldn't make a difference. Through a small window, she saw the figures moving, stalking the houses. Searching. Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her. A faint, vibrating hum. Turning, she froze. A crack had appeared in the basement wall, light seeping through like a wound. Then the hum grew louder, and something began pushing through the crack. It was one of them. Its long arm slid into the room, fingers spreading like black vines. Emma stumbled backward, dropping the rifle. The alien pulled itself inside, unfolding its body, impossibly tall and thin. It stood there, its faceless head turning toward her. Emma screamed as it reached for her. The moment its hand touched her skin, a chilling sensation swept over her body, cold, paralyzing, like her entire being was shutting down. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the alien tilting its blank head, as if curious, and dragging her back toward the crack. When morning arrived, Clearwater was gone. The entire town had been reduced to smoking craters and empty streets. News reports described it as a natural disaster, a meteor shower that caused an explosion. But no one could explain why there were no bodies. No signs of life. Just emptiness. Across the world, others noticed strange cracks appearing in walls, glowing faintly. People whispered of noises at night, low, vibrating hums, and shadows that didn't belong to anything human. The invasion wasn't coming. It had already begun.